Welcome back to Around the Shabbos Table. I'm Ahron Wohlgelernter, and this is a project of the Intentional Jew Podcast Network. This is part 2 of our guest's story. If you heard part 1, then you can continue on. If you did not hear part 1, I encourage you to go back. Both parts of the story are interconnected, and it's important to understand part 1 as well. Although this is a whole different chapter of her life, it very much is predicated on the first part. So if you haven't listened to part 1, go back and listen to it. And I hope you find this episode meaningful as well. And I guess to dig a bit deeper into something you mentioned earlier was, do you tell your kids about your childhood and how you grew up and how much of that you want to explore?
Okay, so it's an interesting question. So I'll first explain where I came from, my background and my childhood, and then I'll answer your question. I grew up in a home that from the outside actually looked like a dream. I succinctly remember from the youngest age people telling me, you are so lucky that you have the parents that you have. They are such special people. Everything that I know about doing chesed, I learned from the home that I grew up in. My parents just shown that was their mitzvah, and they were so osek b'tzarchei tzibor and just really, did beautiful things, really, picked up the ball when nobody else wanted to pick it up, when it wasn't popular, or, made them dirty or whatever it was. Like, they were always there. And so it really looked like a dream. On the inside, it was Gehenna, and I use that word with no exaggeration. Our home was extremely dysfunctional, and there was...
one of many children?
One of many children. And there was abuse. There was physical abuse, emotional abuse, severe. And I was from the older children. I think everyone kind of feels like their younger siblings got away with more, but it is true. My parents did mellow by the time. My younger siblings also had a tough time, but very different from what we went through. By the time my younger siblings were sort of in the school system, social services was already a part of the school system. And when we were part of the school system, it wasn't, people weren't looking out for, our children, do they have bruises on them, things like that. I wore heavy socks or tights my entire elementary and middle school, because...
I never told anybody in the...
Oh, of course, children do not tell. Of course not. It's very shameful, right? It's embarrassing. You feel very different from your friends. No one would understand. And what should I say? That I have like the mean mother and they have such nice mothers? Like, it's so embarrassing. Of course, no, children will never say. So, if in that type of a world where the community, the school, really wasn't aware of these issues or maybe paying attention to them as much as we do now, Baruch Hashem, it was very easy for a child like me to go unnoticed. It definitely comes out in behavior without a question, but in my case, I was always a very, very good student. I loved school, of course. It was my escape from home. And I did my best in terms of, my grades were always top. And, I wanted to please people. Getting people's approval was so important to me, because at home there was so much negative reinforcement that I just was so thirsty, just desperate for this positive reinforcement. So anything that I could do. But, when a person grows up in an environment like that, there's really, you're missing a lot of tools. You're missing, so many things in your toolbox, and just the ability to create healthy relationship, the ability to relate to the people around me without worrying about what they would think. I mean, I could never have anyone come to my house. So, having people come over to play or to study when I was older was like, no way, I'd be so embarrassed, if they would know, like, the type of parents that I have. So, yeah.
When did you know as a child, when did you know that this wasn't normal? This wasn't good? Right away.
I didn't. Like I said before, it becomes your normal, right? When you're born into something, when you're just dealing with it for so long, it becomes your normal. Did I know that there were other types of homes out there that didn't have, abuse and were functioning? And yes, I was very aware of that. I was extremely jealous, but not jealous in a bad way. Like, I wanted so badly a piece of that happiness. I just didn't know how to get it. I never really pushed Hashem away. I think Hashem created me with a neshama that just naturally goes towards him always. So I would lie in at night in bed and cry to Hashem. I never felt alone. I felt lonely before, but I never felt alone. I would cry to Hashem and to my grandmother, who I was named after, but I actually had a very close relationship with her. She was alive when I was born for a number of years, and I was her namesake, and we had a very close relationship. So I would cry to her, and I would cry to Hashem, and that's how my home life was.
So when did this change? When did change happen?
So I'm very fortunate that I always had someone in my life peripherally who maybe not was fully aware, but was aware something was off, and created a space for me if I wanted to come into it. So whether it was a family I was babysitting with when I was younger, babysitting for their kids when I was younger, or this was before cell phones. So in order to get me as a babysitter, you had to call the house. And then you hear, right? You hear things, or a teacher in school, or a neighbor, or whatever it was. So I never had 10 people at once, but I always had one person. There was always one person there. I didn't realize at the time, saying this looking back, I believe that HaKadosh Baruch Hu probably sends anyone in a situation, what they need to have that. And I am very emotionally driven, I guess. I'm very affected emotionally. So, specifically in our home, there was mental illness involved. And so mental illness is this strange kind of monster because, someone could walk around, let's say, with a disease, and it's not something to hide. We like put it out there. We say tell them for him. We visit them. We help out the family, right? But mental illness is actually, in our case, it was a very serious and real personality disorder. And personality disorders are very tricky because you can actually function really, really well if you're not being triggered. The unhealthy part of yourself is not being triggered. So, outside, everything looked great and normal.
I was going to ask you about that. So it was a personality disorder. That's how it could be portrayed on the outside.
Right. And the one big trigger of this personality disorder happened to be being in the role of a parent. Right. So who were the people that were affected by this? Obviously, the children in the home. But you wouldn't see it from any other perspective.
It was both parents or one?
It was one, but again, you have to sort of understand how it works. So when there's a personality disorder, a spouse has a choice either to sort of acknowledge at some point something's off and then either try to get help for the spouse or leave the marriage, whatever it is, or there's another way to deal with it, and that's just, right, beat them or join them, right? So you just keep your head low. It's going to be easier. Don't rock the boat. and you get sucked in, and you kind of become a partner in the damage that's going on without even realizing it. So there's really, I hope you can hear my voice. Actually, there's really zero anger, because it's kind of like, do you get mad at someone for like having cancer? Like, it's not their fault, like this is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave to, this individual. And I am so grateful that it's not genetic. That was the first thing that I, as an adult, when I was going on my journey of recovery, of like just processing everything, I was like, okay, is it genetic? I got to know. And that was super important to me, because I just couldn't imagine what it feels like to live in a brain like that 24/7. Like, it's got to be torture. I'm so grateful that I don't live in a jail like that in my mind. So yeah, there's a lot of understanding. And, as a child, I was
that always, even when you found out, quote unquote, what was up and what it was, you, there was never anger. Right away, you jumped into this perspective of understanding.
Yeah. So basically, I actually didn't find out, none of us knew a diagnosis until I was expecting with my second child. So we actually, until that point, at that point we had already, those of us that already were older and went through therapy and extensive like healing, we knew and understood what had gone on, and that we weren't the cause of it, which is part of what we were led to believe and told as children. But we were actually, victims of what happened, and to learn to have compassion for ourselves and care for ourselves, and learn what it meant to come out from a situation like that. We spent our childhoods really taking care of the parent that had this issue. And so we really, I remember just waking up as an older teen, and making the choice to like, hey, there's a lot of happy people out there. I want a piece of that. What do I have to do to get that? And the family that was in my life at the time, the support system, the husband happened to be a social worker. And I called her up. I said, I need to come over and talk to you and your husband. And it was really from one day to the next. I came over, I sat down at their dining room table, and I said, I want to be happy. How do I do it? Sign me up. And he found me an amazing therapist. And the first thing that I said when I walked in was like, okay, here's the deal. I am not going to date anyone. I'm not going to get married. And I'm not going to become a parent until you tell me that I have a chance at having a healthy marriage and a healthy career as a mother. Because I'm not going to inflict this pain on the next generation. And I saw what happens when a person might grow up in something like that, and they don't stop, acknowledge it, see how it affected them, and it affects you. I mean, in every little detail, it affects you. And then rewire. I mean, there's so much reprogramming and rewiring that you have to do to learn normalization again. So unfortunately, I can't, out of respect and out of confidentiality, I want to be careful not to give too many details. I am open if anyone on, listening to the podcast is going through something similar. I'm happy to provide my email and connect one-on-one, but I just really want to be careful. At the end of the day, right, you have to kind of see it as these are people who, are ill. And so, they still have a million other pieces of them that are so beautiful. Like I said, like any piece of chesed that I do in my home, I learned from them. So, my goal is never to embarrass them or, call them out or be a whistleblower. But it's really, really important for anyone who's listening out there who maybe went through something similar or is going through something similar to understand that there was a time in my life, a really long time in my life, that I did not talk about this because I was sure that no one else was possibly going through even a tenth of it. And so it just made me feel different. And I wanted to feel the same. I mean, my whole childhood, I felt different. I desperately wanted to feel the same. So for a long time, I didn't talk about it. And like I said, like there's a certain shame that comes with it. And it took a lot of hard work to realize that actually this is kind of a trophy, right? When you can go through something like that, when you can go through an inferno and come out on the other side, you know, stronger from it. There's a lot to say about like the resiliency of a human being. We could really be knocked around so hard, always for our best, but it just never, it doesn't have to break us. So people need to know out there that there's so many people like this that have gone through things like this that sit here today and, you know, unfortunately are not able to have, you know, connections with people that are their mommy, that are their daddy, that are their tati, that are, you know, that are their ima. Like this, these are things that every child should have until 120, right? They call us, you know, motherless daughters, right? As we're not orphans, but we're daughters, and there's a mother out there somewhere, but biologically, right? But we don't have access. So that's a reality, but we can choose what we do with that reality. Nothing really that happens to us is bad or good, right? We know that. Nothing that happens is bad or good, right? Trucks hitting us, not bad or good, right? Childhood that's dysfunctional, not bad or good. Right? Everything that happens to us is completely and totally neutral. Definition of bad, right? Anything that takes us further from Hashem. Definition of good, anything that brings us closer to Hashem. So all the circumstances, completely neutral. And then what we do with it, that's your definition of bad or good.
I feel like I can cut your story into 4 different just episodes because we're on, but like you can, but to see that you, not 1, not 2, not 3, and then you just keep on going, that itself is insane. But how do you think that these experiences obviously built you into a resilient person? And we didn't quite get into the answer of how much of this do you tell your children, but
yeah.
Maybe let's go back to that. I'll take that. So just to return to that, how much of this do you tell your children then?
Right. So it's very interesting. Like I knew when my children, you know, were being born, I knew, you know, there was going to come a day where it was going to come up. I didn't really prepare, you know, when that was going to be. Okay, when they're this age, you know, that never really happened, but I was aware it was going to happen one day. The biggest reason that I knew it was going to happen is because they have a very vivacious and active and living relationship with my husband's parents.
And not yours.
Exactly, right? And then my parents aren't in my life at all or in their life at all, unfortunately. So, you know, eventually they're going to pick up on that. And it was just a matter of time. And the time happened when we were... not in the community we are now. It was much earlier on. I believe my youngest biological child was a baby. So yeah, all of my children were born. But she definitely was too young to be part of the conversation. I just remember my older children were around 6, 7. And we were at our table Friday night. Baruch Hashem, no guests were there that week.
No table topics on this one, okay.
And you know how kids are wont to do? They're like, tell me about when you were little. You know, tell me a story from when you were little. So my husband's such a good storyteller. So he started and he starts, you know, oh, like I remember like one time I did this, one time I did that. Like, did you ever make trouble, Daddy? He's such a good guy. Like you can't even imagine him ever making trouble. So he was like, I don't remember ever getting in trouble. Of course he doesn't remember ever getting in trouble. And then he's like, actually there was one time, right? And I'm like laughing. I'm like, oh, one time. And he said, one time I broke my cousin's paper airplane collection. Like me and my younger cousin, we were little, we went into his room and like we just cracked all those little wooden pieces, just, you know, for no reason. And so they were like, oh, what did Grandma do? And he said, it was the only time that Grandma ever hit me. she sat me down and she said, what you did was very wrong. And she took my hand and she hit me on it. Not hard, but it was the only time it ever happened. And my 7-year-old turned to me and said, Mommy, did your parents ever hit you? So there we were, Friday night. My husband and I looked at each other, and in the moment, it felt like the time. Now, you have to be very careful what you tell children at what ages,
7.
obviously.
Right.
You have to filter, you have to say it the right way. So her question was, if my parents ever hit me. And I said, yes. And they said, like what? Like, what'd you do? And I said, I don't really remember what I did. But unfortunately, sometimes when people aren't happy or they're just struggling a lot with their own things, and they hold a lot of like anger inside of them, and they can just sort of, lash out and hit, not because you did something wrong, but just like they need to express themselves, and they end up expressing themselves on you. And that happened to me when I was a child. And I just remember my older two just looking at me, just kind of like wide-eyed, like this was just a new concept to them. And then one of them, my second child, who is, if I had to describe her in one word, it's very easy. The word is empath. She is extremely empathetic. She just, she said, like, were you able to like go to your friend's house, or like go to someone's house so they could like hug you after?
Like she got it.
Yeah. Like weren't you like, did it like you were in pain? Like, couldn't you go someplace? And I said, like, no, I didn't really have friends growing up. I didn't really know how to have friends because I was scared that they were going to find out, the type of home I was in. And she's like, Mommy, you were all alone? And I said, yeah, I guess so. Hashem was with me, but like, I didn't have so many friendships growing up. I had wonderful people around me, but I didn't really know how to make a friendship. And she was sitting across the table from me, and she came down off her chair. She came around, and she just wrapped her little arms around me, and with tears coming around her eyes, she said, Mommy, I wish I could have been there for you. I would have been your friend. And that was our first conversation. And that was it. It ended there. And obviously over the years, it opened, right? It opened the door. And children will ask things, especially when they're in an environment where they're encouraged to express themselves. So children will ask things, and they ask things over the years. And as it was age appropriate, I shared different answers with them in different ways. Now they're fully grown and about to, go off to build their own family. So,
do you ever sit down? Less about you, but do you think that it's important for someone who experienced this to sit down with their children, maybe when they're older, and tell them the story from beginning to end? Or it never really ends, but beginning the story?
I'm very cautious to answer a question like that because I'm not a professional, number one. And number two, this type of situation comes in so many different stripes and colors, and there is not one solution. I strongly recommend finding someone who can guide you through a situation like this. If it doesn't come, for me, it came very instinctually, like what to say and when to say it. But, I strongly recommend it. But I could just tell you from my personal experience, right? I can't apply it to other people. It was very, very important that my children ended up asking me when they did, and that they grew up essentially with the knowledge of my background. Because there are circumstances. Okay. Explain this. Children are born into a world like a blank computer, right? So it has no programs in it, no software, nothing. It's blank. And through their experiences and their interactions with the people around them, coupled with their own personality traits and midos that Hashem puts in them, they grow and they develop. When such a huge chunk is missing from a huge healthy chunk, let's say, is missing from the piece that comes from the people around them, so the behaviors that are implanted are there from the beginning. You have to realize it's not just like someone saw something. We're talking about a blank computer that's being programmed. Okay, so you can't just grow up and say, okay, now I understand what that was, and expect that you're never going to see it again. Not only will you see it again, but as a parent, you're pretty much guaranteed to see it again, because suddenly the roles are reversed. You're the parent, and the child might be saying something or doing something that triggers something from so far back you don't even remember it, but it causes a knee-jerk reaction, an unhealthy knee-jerk reaction, because as much therapy as we went through and as much as we rewired and reprogrammed, that piece, that word, that experience, when we were faced with it in the moment, what came out was what was programmed all those years ago, right? And it takes years and years and years and a lifetime in some cases for certain aspects to really take out the old programming, put in the new programming. So for children to understand that my mother, she's someone who's really working hard on herself, not just for her own happiness, but she really wants us to have the best mother, the best version of herself that she can present, right? For them to understand the context that it's coming from is kind of crucial. It was crucial for my children, because I'm afraid if they wouldn't have had that knowledge, what it would have done to our relationship. But when you understand the background, and the context of someone's behavior or reaction, then it becomes not personal for yourself. You understand that the person themselves is just struggling. It's not a reflection on you. And I think in our family that was like super important for that. It just worked out well, Baruch Hashem, that my children just were aware of it from a young age, so that, and there were times that they were like, be like, okay, mommy, that's something that's not from me, right? That's from you, mommy, right? And I'd be like, yeah, that's from me. That's from me. You're a great kid. You just be a great kid. I'm going to go work on that. So yeah, it was very important in our family. But again, I can't answer it across the board. It's too big of a question and too complex. Yeah, and further on that thought, I can tell you just from personal experience, I feel very fortunate that I had to do so much reprogramming, because what happens when you have to physically, so to speak, physically take out a software, take out a program, right, uproot it, and then consciously put a new one in, is that it is so front and center. You become so aware and so hyper tuned in. So I remember just when my children were younger and I would just be in the grocery store and I could hear from like the aisle over, I didn't know who it was, some kid, and the mother was frustrated, and her tone of voice or the way that she was talking, or, yelling at him or whatever it was, Jewish, not Jewish, whatever it was, no judgment, but thinking like, I'm so grateful that I was that kid once. I know how it feels, and so I cannot inflict it on my child. If I hadn't known how painful it was, I don't know if I would have that sensitivity, and I might sound like that mom in the aisle. One over, right? So I would say more than we have to be aware of it. We all have things that we have to, that we have to work on. And, our children are our biggest motivations and catalysts for growth in who we are as individuals. But anyone who comes from a background where they kind of feel this, like, you look around in the world and you're like, I wish I had like that family or those parents, or like, you know, think about like Yom Tovim and like people get together and like, you know, it's like there's a certain like yearning of like, I wish I had that. And then I look at, you know, who I am as a parent. And I sometimes see my peers and some of them and what they're like as parents. And I am so grateful. I am so grateful for the experience that I had. I honestly don't think I could be the mother that I am any other way. And I think if God forbid, I would have had a different set of circumstances and it would have resulted in me making mistakes on my kids as a result. I'm not sure how I could have lived with myself at the end of the day. Better that the mistakes were made on me and I had to do the work to, you know, learn it the right way, you know, before I was married than the opposite. I don't know if I could have lived with myself inflicting that pain. So I'm very grateful for every step. I mean, I always say, like, I always tell my kids this. Life, we're like puppets on strings. Every limb, every joint, you know, we have this fishing wire. We can't see it. But we're all just being tossed around throughout our days, throughout our years by the master puppeteer himself. And he sort of dances us into one family and puts us there and puts all those people around you and makes them do all the things that they do. And he puts, you know, all the people around you, your friends, your community, you know, makes you meet certain people at certain times. It's all being orchestrated. And it's just incredible. It's such a bracha to have time pass so that you're able to look backwards and connect the dots. You know, it's hard to do that when you're younger because you're in it still, right? You're still in it. But when you're able to like look back, and sometimes you could still be in it in a way, right? You're still dealing with some pieces. But when you have years and decades, it's impossible not to see the puzzle coming together in some way, shape, or form. You start to see how over here it made sense, over there it made sense. So like, okay, you know this famous thing that we all choose, you know, the family that we're born into? I don't know where it comes from, but people talk about it all the time. You know, people talk about this, like you choose the family you're born into. And I often think to myself, like, what in the world were you thinking? What did you choose? But the truth is that that now, you know, decades later, looking back, I wouldn't sell the experiences that I've had for all the money in the world. You cannot, there's no money that can buy these experiences from me. I'm so grateful for them. I cannot be the person I am if not for this. You know, a little bit of what I was saying before, you know, people can look at my life. I started by this, you know, you can look at my life and you can say, perfect? Like, oh, like perfect. That doesn't look perfect to me. It's so perfect. I can't even tell you how perfect, you know, every piece of my life is and this moment in time and where it's brought me. So that is very grateful. Talking about perfection, we will segue, with your permission, into our, you know, our youngest child, who is a gorgeous baby that Hashem just dropped into our lives.
My kids still talk about her because not because they noticed anything, but because she was just so beautiful.
Imprint.
She makes them. Yeah. She's happy and beautiful, and the way your other children deal with her, and they maybe that's not they interact with her and they love her. Deal is not the right word. And that left an impression on them. They still say so. Yeah, she's kind of the jewel. All of our children, but this you know, our baby, when my youngest child was born, we lived in a community that had a very large Jewish Russian community. And we always kind of had people at our house, and so we connected with one couple, and then they brought another couple, and before we knew it, we were like kind of the hangout. And these were young couples, you know, starting their marriages, starting their parenthood, and really didn't necessarily have a command of
the medical system, how it worked in our country versus where they were coming from, which is very, very different. And I guess to them, I was like the experienced mother because I already had quite a few. And they were like, could you come with me to my birth? And I was like, okay. So the first time I was asked, I thought like, wow, that's like special. I guess I'll just be like her mommy because like her mommy can't be here. So I just...
It wasn't like a trained thing that you...
I didn't even know there was such a training. I was just like, okay, I'll just go. Like, so my husband actually is a Kohen. So because of that, there were certain situations where he actually wasn't able to be with me. Like one of my pregnancies ended in a C-section, so he wasn't allowed to be in the OR because of sakana. So no halachic authority. I'm not a halachic authority on that. Everyone needs to ask their own shilas. Just disclaimer. But in our situation, that was the psak that we got. So I always actually had on call for myself a mommy to hold my hand. So I kind of just thought that's what it was. And I went and I just, was someone that I knew and she was friends with me and I held her hand and she got through it. And I did this a few times because she sort of told other people, and I did this a few times and I was like, there's got to be like a better way to do this. Like I could do more than just holding someone's hand. Like, and telling them it's going to be okay. They don't even believe me when I'm saying it. I got to like figure this out. So I start researching and I had never heard of the word doula in my life. And I was like, what's a doula? So I went and I did get trained. I got certified and I took that training and just used it a lot. Probably the most. So I became a certified doula. And with that, kind of propelled me into this unbelievable experience where I kind of I felt like I was like partnering with Hashem a little to like bring his creations, into the world. To this day, there's not a birth that I'm at that I don't sob away, but like there are always tears when that baby is born. I've tried to like shut it off. It just won't go away. But there's something really, really special and beautiful. It's a huge, huge privilege. It's it's really, I feel like Hashem sort of pulls back the curtain a little in that space. And you just, they say there's no atheist in a foxhole. I'm pretty sure there's no atheist in a birth room. So that is a huge part of my career life. Funny enough, I actually, because of the way that I got into it, I didn't even know that people get paid for it. For about a decade and a half.
Even after being certified, it was just...
No idea. For a decade and a half, I was just like hopping around birth rooms. I was so thrilled to be doing this.
Well, there's a lot of time constraints. I mean, you're on call in a sense.
Yes and no, because it's not like a 9-to-5 job, but it's also not like a 7-day-a-week job. I mean, right. It could be a 72-hour job straight, but but it
could be in the middle of the night. Could be on Shabbos. It could be any.
Yes, you got to have a really supportive husband, and we were very fortunate that actually after my youngest was born, about a year and a half later, I actually wasn't well, and we made a choice to hire a live-in to help us. My goal was actually to interview a lot of people because I wanted someone to take care of the house so that I could take care of the children. I didn't want anyone taking care of my children, and and a lot of live-ins just they just naturally go to that nanny mode, and so it took us probably 30 different people. I'm not exaggerating, till I found someone who just got it right. So we were very lucky to have that, and so I had that built-in babysitter as well, which was very fortunate. And my children grew up with it. I remember so clearly my oldest, my kids kind of are very smart. I remember my oldest hearing me on the phone for the first time speaking to someone in labor, and I asked if her water broke, and when I got off the phone, this is like a child whose feet are firmly planted on the ground and could be reading a book but hears everything, right? And she said, "Mommy, how could water break?" And I was like, "Oh, they hear things. Okay, be careful."
Walls, right? Yeah. Walls of ears.
Walls of ears. So my kids definitely grew up with, they will joke that we cannot bring people to our supper tables during the week because, they've watched C-sections. They've watched, they've seen stuff. Our male children are going to be amazing husbands.
My sister this week just had a baby at home, so she not on purpose. So she was on her way and then had it at home. So
yeah. So in any case, this piece of my life is actually super important because, when I share our baby, our story about our baby and how she came into our lives, I hope that you're going to start to see how the puzzle pieces are coming together. Our youngest child was 13. We were so happy with our children that, we maybe shouldn't have had or couldn't have had, right? So we were very grateful we didn't have a million of them. I think I do remember my husband saying something when I was engaged. We did talk that question, like, oh, how many kids do you want to have? I think most chassanagals talk about it, or maybe right after marriage, I'm not sure. But, and I'm pretty sure he said 12. I'm pretty sure that was his number. We do not have 12. But everyone is very precious to us. And our youngest was 13. And we were just happy, and we were in a groove, It's like there's no more diapers, there's no more
babies.
Yeah, you can schedule stuff, you can do stuff. No one's, it just was a groove. We also had our children are very close in age, so it's just they were good friends, and they like to do stuff together. So we did stuff together, lots of stuff, and. We went on a road trip. We love exploring Hashem's world. I have this thing that I am afraid to get to Shemayim after 120, and Hashem's going to look at me and go, "Oh, you didn't go see my Grand Canyon? How could you? You were in their backyard. How could you?" So I have this thing that we have to just try to see as much of Hashem's world as we possibly can. We don't do big cities too much. We really go into nature. But we were on a road trip. It was actually our first road trip after moving to the community that we live in now. And we went 5 weeks, I think, 6 weeks. And we just explored some of the most beautiful states. I mean, Utah, Colorado, California, up the coast, all the way up to the redwoods and the sequoia forest. And I mean, we just we lived it up. We saw beaches, we saw, deserts, we saw sand dunes, we saw everything. We experienced it all. And everywhere we went, I mean, you're talking about dozens of places, pretty much across the board. We kept bumping into families. I imagine most of them weren't even Jewish, but, at state parks, on hikes, at the beach, that had children with special needs of all ages, biological, adopted, fostered, and not just bumped into them, but would interact with us, and sometimes for a while, and sort of hook themselves onto us. So it kind of became a theme on our trip that first year. And the last day where we were driving home, it was a long drive home, and we were talking about the trip, and I said, "Okay, guys, what was your favorite part?" And one of the kids said, "Mommy, wasn't it weird that we kept bumping into these kids?" And I was like, yeah, that was like pretty amazing. That was pretty amazing that we got those interactions. And my kid said, like, it was so special that like these families adopted or fostered. I wonder if like the Jewish community has like, if there's families out there that are looking for like a loving home for a child that for whatever reason, they're not able to care for. We have a loving home, Mommy. We should do that. And I was like, really? I looked at my husband and I was, okay. I said, I'll look into it. So we got back and I looked into it and I discovered a very special organization called JCAN, Jewish Children Adoption Network. They run out of Denver, run by a couple, very, very special couple. And basically they're just a registry. They're not an agency. They're not anything like that. But what they do is they specifically focus on children that come from all types of backgrounds, children, babies, anything. And it could be like a medical issue. It could be a psychological issue. It could be circumstances, it could be a child that has a diagnosis that we know this child's not going to make it, all types of things. And they just send, anyone who's interested, any family that's interested, they send them a pamphlet that's quite thick, and it goes through anything that could possibly go wrong, basically. It starts off pretty simple. By simple, I mean like blind, deaf, whatever. And then
for you,
right? And then like it goes into like, and you start to turn the pages. And I remember sitting there with my husband filling it out because there's 3 columns. There's, you have to say if you feel, that you have the home that's able to take in a child with X, Y, and Z, right? So it's either yes, no, or maybe, like if you're not sure. And we started going through these things and we thought, okay, this is easy. And then like you start to like every organ that could possibly go wrong, every, missing a limb that, comes from an abusive background was, so many different things. And I just was like, I would read it and then I'd be like, Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem. You start to just thank Hashem for your healthy children. And we filled it out. We're not that like incredibly special. There's like unbelievable people out there that like say yes to some really, really, full situations. We just checked off, I think, deaf and Down syndrome. Because that's just the kids that we met on this trip were like most of them had Down syndrome. So we checked that off and we sent it back, and that's it. They sort of hold you in a computer until they get a phone call. There's many agencies and organizations that know about them, and their computer system sort of has a formula, and they type in, the type of baby, and they come up with a name, and they're just shadchanim. That's all they are. That's not all they are. They're beautiful shadchanim. So we did that, and 1.5 years later, we got a call about a baby. And would we be interested? Are we still interested? So my husband and I felt that ultimately any child that we would take in, this was a baby with Down syndrome. And so you have to think, 40 years down the road. And when you're thinking like that, you have to sort of factor into the equation that there's going to come a time where our children are actually responsible for this child. So it became a choice that was our children's choice and not ours. That was very clear to us from the beginning. And so we went to our kids. This was 1.5 years after they had like so excited or whatever, given in this, we had done this registry. And we said, okay, guys, we got a call. What do you think? Sat down around the table. We always had, from the time the kids were little, these family meetings. And we said, okay, what do you think? Our jobs as parents is to focus on our children. And this was clearly not, this is bringing in a child where not every child was feeling in the space. And I think part of it was that like some of our kids had been children before, like 1.5 years earlier, and then had hit teenage, and teenagers need certain spaces, and they need certain, they have certain, they go through things, right? And so sometimes they're like, I don't want to share my space right now, right? I really need to work through who I am right now. So so we called up and we said, it's not for us. And that was it. And I think what happened was that I because we had said like, no, that would be it, that we would be off the registry. And that was it. It was just like, we chalked it up as like a beautiful hishtadlus that we did, and that was it. And we were so proud of our kids for like being open to this and wanting to.
Right. And also saying no.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a crazy thing.
And knowing what they wanted. Yeah. And that was it. Fast forward 2 years. Outside, I'm actually babysitting for twins. Because, now in my funnest job ever, Hashem like just dropped into my life. Funny enough, on that road trip we were on, that first road trip, I got a phone call. I still remember where we were. And my phone rang, and it was an organization on the East Coast. They were looking for someone who had some experience in the birth field to help out with hashgacha in fertility labs. And I was like, really? Ooh, I was like a kid in a candy shop. I was like, sign me up. They're like, no, we pay. And I was like, are you crazy? I'll pay you. Like, this is so much fun. So on top of like everything that I get to do, for moms and babies and I don't even do, I just like hold the space there, and they do amazing things themselves. But on top of that, I actually like talk about like pulling the curtain back. Unbelievable. Mamish, like nisim and flows go on in those labs. So,
or what's your role in the lab?
Hashgacha mainly. So just making sure that any biological matter that comes from Jewish patients remains sealed. So everything's sealed with my seals, and nothing can be open, nothing can be done in the lab if I'm not there, if I don't open it. It goes on for forever. As long as there's biological matter in the lab, I'm there. And there's a number of labs that I work in. I go wherever they send me, or the organization send me, and I'm the only one. So you're traveling throughout the metroplex that I live in. Right. It's a large metroplex, meaning like every city has like outside little places, right? So, you could have something in the main city, but then like you could have to travel 40 minutes to like, a town outside if a clinic is there.
I thought you were traveling back to the East Coast.
No. So they try to have hashgacha in any city that needs it. So I am the person that does it, where I am. So 2 years later, when I got this call, I was actually babysitting for twins that were actually my very first hashgacha that I did. So I feel very connected, and I'm so grateful that usually when hashgacha is done in larger cities, there's a lot of anonymity, confidentiality. Many times the mashgicha is not even meeting the couple, but in a smaller community like we have, there's a lot of emotional support, and because also people know what I do as a living, so there's a lot of emotional support, and that runs through from before to way after. And so it's a beautiful privilege, really privileged. So I was babysitting these twins, and my phone rings, and I look at the caller ID, and it says Jake, and I'm like, that's weird. So I picked up the phone, and they said, we're just wondering, like, are you still open to a baby? We have a 2-week-old baby that has Down syndrome, a little girl. And I was like, I don't know, because, my children last time, I don't know, we have to ask our children. And so I finished babysitting as calmly as I possibly could. Your heart is like beating out of your chest, like what is about to happen or what is not about to happen, but there's like definitely an excitement and adrenaline. And, we called a meeting. Our one of our daughters was in Eretz Yisrael at the time. So we looped her in on the phone. It kind of went like this. Hey, honey, we're having a family meeting. Just wondering. We got a phone call from JCAN. They have a baby, 2 weeks old, Down syndrome, little girl. Are you interested? Yeah, mommy, I think this is a really good time. Great, I'll get back to you. Bye. That's how that went. And then the rest of
as do most Zoom meetings, so that's fine.
Right. And then like the rest of the kids, I mean, everyone was like, yes, 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 and yes. And my husband and I were like, what happened? What happened was that there's a plan in this world. That's what happened. And every neshama has a preordained place where it's meant to be. And a year and a half earlier, 2 years earlier, that baby had a place and it wasn't our home. And this baby had a place and it was our home. That's all that happened. So we, this beautiful treasure, from one day to the next. And it was just dropped into our lives. I mean that in the most positive way. We really didn't have much preparation or training or anything aside from that. We just, like my kids said, we had a lot of love to give, and Hashem kind of rallies behind you, and He sends the shlichim that are needed to show you the way. So we definitely had and still have beautiful, beautiful connections with people that are have walked this path before us many, many times, and we are definitely sitting on their shoulders and riding this beautiful journey. So our baby is with us for about a year and a half now, and I am very fortunate to have a wonderful relationship with the biological parents, which I treasure very, very much. And I would say I really want to use this platform for a moment because I've been thinking about writing an article in one of the Jewish magazines, but I just haven't had the time. One of the most common comments that I hear is, how can a mother give away her child? And I have a really hard time with that judgment call. There are so many details to situations. We don't even know half of it. I am lucky to know a lot of the story, but it doesn't even matter if we know it or we don't know it. We need to assume that we don't know. I have so much respect for our baby's birth parents. I know their situation and the choice that they made and why they made it. And I can tell you that this choice actually took them 4 weeks of heartbreak to really let go. Because the truth is, it's very unnatural for a mother to give away a child.
Especially to watch someone else raise the baby. Right?
It's extremely unnatural. I think the only case that there wouldn't be, just tearing your neshama out would maybe if there's mental health involved, so it kind of numbs those feelings. But it's not a natural thing. Hashem makes us connect with our children that we grow inside of us for 9 months. It's a natural thing. So this, I can testify that this was a case, and I'm sure many, if not all, cases are very similar to this, where a mother goes lifnim mishur sadim, really lamala min hateva, and she puts aside her own selfish reasons for having and raising this child and says, what's best for this child is somewhere else. I'm going to put aside me. And I remember telling the birth mother soon after, when we started to build our relationship, that when we made a kiddush for our baby, she was about 6 weeks old. And we had a lot of people that came in, relatives that came in for the kiddush, and we had a lot of people at our home for Shabbos. And we have something incredible that we do at our Shabbos table called table topics. And it's basically little cards that have different topics or, interesting discussion starters. And my kids get to choose a card, and we go around the table, and it's just an interesting way to sort of get to know people. A lot of times we have people that we've never met before, so it's any question from who were you named after to, what's your favorite saying, or who's a role model growing up, things like that.
I did a whole episode on what was your favorite quote. I did with my father right after we met you guys. So then that week I was just thinking about it, and I came up with 4 better ones than I had, and we went back and forth. So inspired by you too.
So one of my kids pulled out from the box, "Who is your hero?" And there were a lot of people at the table, but as soon as she pulled it out, I was like, "Oh, I'm going to cry." And I don't want to cry because there's so many people here, but I already know who it has to be. And so we go around in order, and the child who chose it was sitting next to me, and they went in the opposite direction of me. So I was the very last person. And when they got to me, I really tried the whole time to hold it together. I'm like, "You can do this. Just say what you need to say and get out of there." But I couldn't. I didn't manage. I just said, it's very easy for me to say in this moment, I've had many heroes throughout my life, people that are role models to me. But in this moment, I just can't think of anyone bigger than this baby's birth mother. And I said, heroes, they're not always wearing capes and big smiles and have big muscles, and they don't always get awards. Some of them, they really get kicked down into the gutter. People whisper about them behind their backs. They're judged. They're not accepted. Heroes don't always look like knights in shining armor. But this mother has taught me that I had no idea what it means to sacrifice for my children. And I have, I can't, she's on such a high pedestal for me. I'm just completely dispel from what she's done. Our baby will grow up hearing her life story as her bedtime story. And the reason that she will is because this was the very first question I was asked when I picked this baby up, put her in my car, and I'm driving home, and a relative called me, knowing what was going on, and asked this question.
Great timing for people in your life asking great questions.
Yes. A wonderful relative it happens to be. I'm glad that people feel comfortable being honest. She said, when she grows up, are you going to tell her that she's adopted? How is she going to feel to know that she was given away? It was the first time I heard the question. I've heard it many times since, this term of giving away. And I had like a visceral shudder. Like my body was like, it felt so wrong. It didn't match the situation at all. And what came out of me was just instinctive. And I said, she wasn't given away. She was given. And this relative said to me, what do you mean? And I said, you don't understand. Up in Shemayim, about 10.5 months ago, there was a board meeting. God called a board meeting. And he said, okay, I need all my head honchos here. And he called in all the big guys, the big malachim. And he's like, listen, guys, I have a task for you. It's a big one. I got to show you something. And he pulled out from his pocket this neshama that was so bright and sparkling with brilliance that the malachim had to look away. And he's like, I need to find like a really, really special vessel of a mother to grow this neshama into a human for 9 months. I need you to go down. Don't just find anyone. You need to find someone really special. And then I need you to do something else. I need you to find a family that after this holy mother will grow this neshama into a baby. I need to find another family that their job will be to love this baby. And they went down, and you know what? They took a look at my home, and I didn't meet the bar. I didn't meet the bar. They skipped over my home. They ended up in her birth mother's home. And they took a look at the siblings, and they took a look at the parents, and they're like, yeah, perfect. Oh, this is it. This is it. This is where she belongs. And that's where she went. And I don't know why. I don't know why this baby needed and got and was privileged to have, 2 mothers to love her. But families are made in many different ways, and this is what ours looks like. This is what hers looks like. I have no idea why that just came out of me when I was posed that question for the first time, but it was just so wrong to think that there was any correct way to put the word away next to the word given in this situation. This whole situation was just about given. This neshama was given to a mother, and then this mother went and gave. And then I and my children and my husband are doing everything we can to give. It's just about giving. And this is her life story, and this is going to be her bedtime story when she's old enough, to say, Mommy, can you tell me a story? This is going to be it. She's going to grow up knowing how lucky she is, how special she is, and how loved she is. So I don't mind wrapping it up. We've been at it for a while.
Maybe you could, instead of me saying a message, maybe you could say a message to the listener, a message that you need, that you want to give over. Maybe we could end with that.
I first want to say, just looking back, there's a lot of different things that I've shared. There's so much more. I mean, life is so multidimensional, and my husband could come here and say 10 times more things than I can about his life and his journey. But if
I can get you before you leave tomorrow morning, maybe we'll.
Looking back, you start to see like patterns. When I was a child, I grew up in an environment where I was meant to hold a space for someone else. Okay, it wasn't in a healthy way, but that was definitely what my job was, what my role was. The profession that Hashem dropped me into, I meant to hold a space, to be a fly on the wall, right? So that other people can be the best they can be, right? Hashem sent me a husband who doesn't need me at all. He's extremely independent. But by nature of the fact that he doesn't hear, he doesn't speak on the phone, he cannot hear on the phone. So anytime he wants to make a phone call, right, he needs someone to facilitate that. I'm not meant to live his life for him, but I'm meant to hold the space for him when he needs it. And now we have this beautiful baby, and she's running circles around us for sure. She's quite the personality, and no doubt will be quite independent as she grows up. But she, again, there's different needs that come with a situation like this. There's so many things that she can't do for herself. And again, our job is to hold that space. I'm so fortunate that I think people search for their entire lives sometimes to figure out, what their purpose is. And actually was at a program with Rav Gabriel Friedman, Eretz Yisrael recently, and we were talking about this in a one-on-one conversation, and he said, actually, there's a very, very few people in the world that, they have they have to start that organization, or they have to, there's very few people that have that type of tafkid. Most of us, we have to sort of look to see what are our strengths, what are the circumstances we give in all of that, and figure it out that way. And I feel very fortunate that I have learned through my life that my job is actually behind the scenes. It's not front and center in the spotlight, which is a big part of why this podcast is being done this way. I'm going to end with this message. A takeaway. As you can tell, I was not the most popular kid in school, although I did have a lot of opportunities for friendship. And I had wonderful people around me, but I just, I wasn't the popular kid because I was afraid to be the popular kid. And really, from the outside, everything looked quite under ordinary. It's only these extraordinary little bursts of things that happen, in my life that people kind of say, oh, wow, that's quite incredible. But the truth is that we don't really live in the moments of, these crazy things that happen. We don't really live in those moments. Those moments happen, and then it's the before and the after that really stays with us. Someone once told me something really beautiful, that when we have moments in our life that really, really are challenging, that it just feel complete darkness. It's in those moments sometimes, even when we turn to Hashem, many times, at least for me personally, specifically in the moments that are completely dark, we actually, there's no one home. There's no one home. At the moments that we really need him the most, where are you? How come I don't feel you? And I heard this beautiful, beautiful thing. It's kind of like if you watch a small child in a playground who's, most children are scared of dogs, right? You watch a child in a playground and they're playing, and the father, little boy's playing, and the father's sitting on a bench somewhere, watching the child from the side. And someone comes along walking a dog, and it's a big dog, and it's barking away, and it's a little ferocious. And this little boy goes running down from the playground and crying and running over to his father, so scared, right? And of course the father, gets down and holds his hands open wide, and his son comes running into his arms. What do children do when they're afraid? So many times they'll close their eyes. There's a sense of, if you don't see it, it's not there, right? So this child goes running into his father's arms, closes his eyes, takes his face, and he just presses it into his father's chest, just snuggles in there real tight. And his father just wraps his arms around him, holds him. That's what's going on in our moments of darkness. That's what's going on. Make no mistake about it. Not only is he there, but the reason that it's so dark is because he's holding you so tight. And that should be the biggest comfort. I hope that everything that I shared today can at least touch or help even one person. And I just want to put it out there again that if anyone on a personal level would like to connect, I am open to it. I'm just not able to obviously share personal details, on a public forum, but I'm open.
Right, and you could reach out to me, and I could facilitate that as well. So, okay, terrific. There's nothing to say. Meaning, wow.
Have a good Shabbos.